We're at our last lecture, which is crazy. Just remember a little reminder these lectures are intended to give you guys some potential topics to write on in your final paper. So, yes, they're interesting and they do help us illuminate some different aspects of the book, but also we are going to a final paper in the next week or two. So, just keep in mind what you might want to write about. Today we are going to talk about Darl has gone to Jackson. We are going to talk about the psychoanalytical theory, which we did way back in fall, and we are going to apply it today to As I Lay Dying. So this should be pretty fun, and we get to talk more about Darl, who, let's be honest, is probably one of the most fascinating characters in this text. So, and go to the next slide. There we go. So, the resolution of Darl's storyline, particularly as he rides on a train to a mental hospital in Jackson, laughing hysterically the entire time, it kind of naturally leads us to consider a psychoanalytical lens. And I think this is totally justified because the novel is super rich in material for a psychoanalytical reading. The very nature of the novel is stream of consciousness in the form of monologues from viewpoints of a number of different distinct characters. So that means we get a really in-depth look at the inner workings of nearly every character's mind. So if you're leaning that direction now, I'd like to spend some time first outlining the key concepts we need to keep in mind if you are going to attempt a psychoanalytical reading, and then highlight a few areas of the novel that might be worth looking at through this perspective. It's important for us to remember, first and foremost, that the purpose of psychoanalytical criticism is not to diagnose characters with mental illness, although this can be a helpful framing device. The purpose of psychoanalytical criticism specifically is to look at the text through the lens of Freudian theories on psychology, which is centered on a few key concepts, and we're going to review them. So it's the unconscious, repression, defenses, and then the id, ego, and superego. At the heart of it all, Freud's theories, and thus psychoanalytical criticism, is the idea of the unconscious, that our behavior is affected and influenced by a part of our mind that we do not actually control. Tyson calls it the notion that human beings are motivated, even driven by desires, fears, needs, and conflicts of which they are unaware. These are things that at the heart of everything we do, these are the things that are at the heart of everything we do, but we keep buried within our minds to the point that we're not even like 100% aware of them ourselves. So furthermore, Tyson believes that the unconscious mind was influenced by events from our childhoods, and that as we grow up, we go through different stages that create different stages of desire, but also fear of types of loss, and more importantly, repression. The idea of repression is that we will try to remove from our conscious minds, the part that we're aware of, our most painful and unhappy memories. It doesn't remove these memories entirely, it just pushes them to the very deepest parts of our minds and tries to hide them there. However, they will still have a strong influence on the things we do and the actions we take. We just aren't aware of it anymore because we have pushed them so far down and out of our consciousness. Tyson states that we unconsciously behave in ways that will allow us to play out our conflicted feelings about the painful feelings and emotions we repress. Or, though we have repressed these ideas, they will still come out in other ways through our actions, even if we're not fully aware of it. In order to keep these unhappy but pivotal memories and feelings buried deep in the unconscious mind, we develop what Freud calls defenses, including selective perception, selective memory, denial, displacement, projection, regression, a fear of intimacy, and even a fear of death. These defenses help to keep the repressed memories in the unconscious. Freud believed that the two parts of our minds, the conscious and the unconscious, could be further categorized into three different sections known as the id, the ego, and the superego. The ego is our conscious mind. It is the part of our mind that actually makes decisions and also utilizes the defenses mentioned above. However, it is influenced by the id and the superego, which together make up our unconscious mind. The id represents our most base desires and instincts, the things that we would do if no one were to tell us we couldn't. And then on the flip side, the superego represents our conscious. So our ideas of judgment of both ourselves and others against what we perceive to be the societal standards and requirements. The superego is the part of our mind that keeps us from doing the immoral or dangerous things that our id might otherwise want us to do. Due to the way As I Lay Dying is written, close reading analysis can be a rich method for uncovering some of these concepts with regard to different characters. What are the things swirling about in their unconscious minds that are influencing them so that they behave in different ways? What memories and losses are they repressing? What defenses do they seem to possess or utilize? What part of their unconscious seems more powerful, the superego or the id? It's very tempting to go with Darl here, but any one of the Bundrens would well benefit from a psychoanalytical reading to try to get to the bottom of why they are who they are. Now, I know I said earlier that we're not necessarily going to diagnose the characters with mental illness, but I don't want to pretend that it's not enormously tempting to do so with Darl, given that he ends up going to a mental institution. With that in mind, I want to talk about a few psychological concepts that might be worth keeping in mind when addressing Darl and his final break from reality in the end of the book. The key psychological concept that seems most relevant to Darl is what's known as dissociation. Dissociation falls on a very wide spectrum, but the important thing to know is that it involves some sort of detachment from reality. Now, this can be just as simple as daydreaming when you're bored. When you do this, you are, on some degree, disassociating from reality. However, when the dissociation becomes pathological, meaning that it's related to a mental illness or a disease, then it can lead to some more serious states of dissociation. This can include feelings that either your own self or the world are not real, called depersonalization or derealization. There are certainly several examples of Darl expressing feelings that could be examples of depersonalization. Remember his monologue early on about emptying yourself for sleep. Dissociation is often closely related with post-traumatic stress disorder, a mental disorder that can develop after a person is exposed to a traumatic event, including warfare. It's subtle throughout the book, but there are actually a few clues that Darl fought in World War I. In his final chapter, in which he has certainly entered a dissociative state, Darl says that he has a little spyglass that he got in France in the war. Earlier in the novel, in Anne's first chapter, he complains that a mysterious they tried to threaten Anne's to give up Darl, trying to shorthand him with the law. He's very vague here, but it could refer to Darl being drafted as a soldier during World War I. Anne's, of course, is upset because losing Darl just means losing money, especially as Anne's doesn't work. It seems clear by the end of the novel that Darl's military service was damaging on a far deeper level than just that. PTSD, which was known as shell shock in this time period, includes symptoms of dissociation, hypersensitivity, and difficulty sleeping. Now, Darl is lacking one major symptom, which is reliving the traumatic experience, but otherwise it seems to fit. It's just one possible interpretation, though, and I want to stress again that the beauty of Darl's character is that he's just so ambiguous. There are so many different ways to look at him and to try to explain his behavior and actions. And this kind of stands for all of the characters in the text. That's one of the really fun things about this text. So if you are going to take the psychological route in your approach to your final paper, just remember to keep an open mind and to look at it from every possible angle.